With just over 6 months until Election Day, voters could have a third-party choice on the ballot. Independent Michigan Congressman Justin Amash left the Republican Party last year. That was after he alleged President Trump had committed impeachable offenses. He's launched a 2020 exploratory committee and wants the backing of the Libertarian Party. I'm joined now by Congressman Amash. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us this morning. A lot of people waking up this morning and asking the question.
Thanks for having me here.
My pleasure. Asking the question, why now? Why at this late stage of the game, in the middle of a national and global health crisis, are you qualified to run for president?
What people want is someone who's practical, who's honest, who will represent every American. And right now what we have in Washington is two parties that are always fighting each other, that aren't representing the American people. We saw that with the most recent relief packages, where most of the aid was directed to helping those at the top and very little got through to the people who need it most. And people are tired of this. They want someone who's going to be practical, who will bring real, honest ideas to the table.
Okay, but I'm curious to get your thoughts about your qualifications right now. Fair enough that you raised what the people want. What qualifications do you have to lead this country?
Well, I'm a determined person. You've seen my stances in Congress. I was willing to go up against my own party at the time to pursue impeachment against the president. I've been willing to stand up against both parties time and again. I was one of the few people to speak out when it came to this relief package, to point out that it wasn't helping the people directly. And we need people like that. We need people who have leadership skills, who can stand up against those in power, can stand up to those who want to continue the bad process we have in Congress. And I have those skills, and I'll bring those to the table.
I'm sure you're aware, Congressman, there's been a lot of pushback from both sides of the aisle, to be fair, on you getting into this race. I want to actually play for you something former Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill said on Morning Joe today. Watch this.
The noise you heard yesterday was a confetti cannon going off in the White House when Justin Amash announced that he was running for president. Every single anti-Trump vote needs to be focused on the viable candidate for president. Every single one. We do not have room for error in this election. This is no time for a Ross Perot or a Jill Stein or a Ralph Nader.
Congressman, tell the American people why she is wrong. In 2016, third parties got about 6% of the popular vote, one of the several factors that many analysts say helped Donald Trump pull off his upset against Hillary Clinton.
Well, I think there's a factual mistake there. I mean, we don't know who people will vote for. It's impossible to say whether more people will vote for Biden or Trump if I'm in the race or not in the race. So I think there's a big factual issue there. But more important, we want to give the American people more choices. This is about democracy. It's about representative government. And the idea that we're going to tell people, hey, we can't have another choice on the ballot because it might upset one or the other candidate, that's pretty ridiculous. And I will hear from lots of Trump supporters as well who say, oh, you're helping Joe Biden. So to be honest about this, if people want to vote for someone, they should vote for that person. And if they don't want to vote for that person, don't vote for that person. But don't attempt voter suppression, essentially, by denying people more candidates on the ballot. That seems really ridiculous and, frankly, anti-American.
Well, but the bottom line of this, though, Congressman, people vote based on who represents what they care most about and these issues. So where is your base of support? It's hard to see how you would get any any Trump voters, since, as you mentioned, you have been an outspoken critic of the president. But let's be honest, you're also a conservative who voted against Obamacare. You're against universal health care. You're anti-abortion. You don't exactly line up with Joe Biden or the Democratic Party either. So people are going to vote on the issues that matter to them. And I'm asking you, there doesn't seem to be a lot of people who are lined up with where you stand on these issues.
Actually, I think you're making the case for the candidacy. There are millions of Americans who aren't represented by either Donald Trump or Joe Biden, who aren't represented by the Republicans or the Democrats. And those millions of Americans deserve a choice on the ballot. And it's pretty silly to say, well, we shouldn't allow another candidate to be on the ballot. We just want to have these two candidates. And in fact, the way we got Donald Trump is because every Republican who didn't like Donald Trump was told insistently, they were told, you must vote for Donald Trump because he's the Republican nominee and you have to vote for the Republican. Similarly, people are being told today on the Democratic side, you have to vote for Joe Biden, and Republicans are being told you have to vote for Donald Trump again. That's not the way the system is supposed to work. We're supposed to have a system where the people are represented, and there are millions and millions of people, I would say the plurality of Americans, who are not well represented by either of these two parties or either of these two candidates, and they deserve an opportunity to vote for someone that they want to win.
Okay, so fair enough. You're talking about changing the system. You can certainly do that in a non-election year, but I'm curious to get your thoughts once again specifically about this. Is it worth the risk of running if you mean that you could possibly reelect Donald Trump? You're very anti-Trump. You've made that very clear. So the question then becomes, is it worth the risk of running and getting President Trump back in office for another 4 more years?
What I'm offering is another option for people to vote, and they deserve that option. I represent millions of people who aren't represented by these two parties, and they deserve that opportunity. We can always say the next election is the time or the one after that, but the truth is the system will never change unless people step up. And we've seen time and again throughout history, people step up who were told this is not the time, whether it was Barack Obama or dozens of other candidates throughout history. So we need to have the opportunity to vote for the person we want to win. And if people don't want that person to win, then don't vote for that person. It's actually a very simple process. We should be expanding the ability for people to vote. We should be finding ways to make it easier for people to access ballots and vote, not more difficult. And this idea that we want to have fewer candidates makes things difficult for people. It reduces their choices, and that's not the American way.
All right, so let me ask you really quickly about libertarians, because as you know, they're obviously for limited small government, but many argue this is the exact time where people need government more so than ever. How would a libertarian solve the current pandemic that we're in, both financially and from a health perspective?
Well, from a health perspective, you have to give more flexibility to people who are on the ground. This idea that you're going to control everything in Washington and have a few people get in a room and decide how the whole country operates is patently absurd. You can't have that kind of understanding of what's going on the ground in various counties throughout the country in one room. So you have to allow people to make decisions on the ground. The White House can help coordinate things, of course, and it can provide guidance. I think that's really important. But you have to leave it more to people at home and in the states especially to make determinations about where the need is greatest and what they need. As for financial relief, I've said repeatedly that what people should have is direct pay from the government during this time. So what they're doing, the Republicans and Democrats, is funneling money to the banks or directly to big corporations using the Federal Reserve. And that's not the right approach. There are millions of people who are struggling right now. They can't get unemployment very easily. They've lost their jobs. And the government is telling them, oh, we'll just give you one $1,200 check instead of having a system where they can get a monthly distribution from the government to make it through this crisis.
Yeah, I was going to say, but that doesn't necessarily sound like limited government when you're having the government pay folks a lot of money throughout the course of this crisis, which a lot of people argue say is exactly what should happen.
No, it is limited government. If I might interject, it is limited government because what the government is doing right now is spending $3 trillion, but it's funneling it in all sorts of different ways. And it's a convoluted, crazy scheme. And you're adding a lot of transaction costs in the way of getting aid to people who need it. What a limited government person would say is if the government's going to be involved in this sort of way, what we want to do is get government out of the way as much as possible. Give money to the people and let them make a decision about how they spend it.
And let me ask you, as you go forward in making your decision as to whether or not you've run, have you reached out to people to gauge whether or not you will have the financial support needed to compete in a race of this magnitude? Have you gotten any, even without naming names, but have you gotten any major financial donors lined up?
No, I haven't asked major financial donors because that's not the point of this race. The point of this race is to represent the people. And there are millions of people who want another option. And I'm very confident we can raise the money. When I've run for Congress many times, it's not been based on a whole bunch of big financial donors. It's largely been small donors. As we've seen in this current cycle, most of my donations have come from very small donors. And it will continue to be that way. And I'm proud of running a race where we get the support of millions of small donors.
Thank you for checking out our YouTube channel. why don't you subscribe? It's really easy. Just click on that button down there. And for more news from MSNBC, click on any of these videos here for the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more videos from MSNBC with our newsletters. Head over to msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up.